Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark the Maker. This is episode 88 of the show. As you may know, if you listened to episode 87, we had been in a conversation with Pruitt and had to take a break, and we're going to pick that back up here in episode 88. For those who aren't familiar with the show, we are a panel discussion. It's myself and three knife maker friends, Mr. Tom Crine, Mr. Sean Kendrick, and Mr. Michael Birch. And the four of us talk about lots of stuff and sometimes have interesting guests like Pat come join us and tell us about their craft and what they do and how they got to where they are. So we'll resume that conversation with Pat here in just a second. We first want to thank our patrons. These are people who support us through a website called Patreon, Patreon.com. You can go there and search for us, and there's a way for you to basically subscribe or to pledge a couple bucks every month to help us out with keeping the lights on, keeping the equipment in motion, and sometimes replacing stuff when it gets broken. So we want to thank all of our friends on Patreon who help us out with financial support each month, and we're very thankful for that. Also want to give a big thank you to our friend George Pelagonia at American Metal Exchange. American Metal Exchange is a provider of titanium, Damasteel, Damascus, Mokame, all kinds of fancy materials for knife makers. So if you need good stuff, high quality exotic materials, go to amxinc.com. That's American Metal Exchange, and George will help you out. Thanks, George, for all your support. Okay, well, let's get back into it with Pat. This is our attempt to pick things back up and dive right back into the conversation where we were. All right, so we talked about CNC and laser and all the cool stuff you can do with laser. We talked about 3D printing now. Technology is a big theme for you, Pat, right? I mean, it's a big part of what you do, and it seems like a really key enabler. Are there other technology-related things or processes or technological approaches in your work or the way that you look at designs?
Yeah. I mean, I would like to say technology is a huge part of what I do. Yeah. And that comes from, the engineering schooling and the background, that comes just with the advancement of, manufacturing processes as a whole. And I think the nice thing about technology, especially industrial technology in fabrication and manufacturing, is that it's always evolving. Right? It's not, the technology 10 years ago is radically different from what it is today. And you go back further, 20, 30, 40 years. And the thing that blows my mind about the technology is how a lot of the industrial technology, as it matures over time, becomes super affordable in the sense that, you look at 3D printing and, 20, 30 years ago, that was a $500,000 investment.
Right.
Now you can buy it for $300 and be able to 3D print. So I think for me, looking at the technologies that are out there and how they're becoming cheaper, better, faster, and I think most importantly, attainable. Like yeah. I think for your average, and I say average person, right? That as we start moving forward, one of the technologies that I don't have in-house is the ability to efficiently cut sheet metal, right? Yeah. And when I say efficiently cut, what's the best way to do that? It's either going to be with a water jet or a laser, right? So being able to look at that technology and okay, when is it going to be attainable? Well, now you can buy a full-on laser cutter, right, where 2022 prices, $30,000. That's attainable, And so that's what I look forward to, as technology evolves, as a technology matures. is how attainable it then becomes for someone. And the nice thing about that is, you build that skill set over time with all the different technologies that you either get exposed to or that you become familiar with. And as you're able to either bring them in-house or subcontract them out to people who do it, it just provides like a very good arsenal of skill set to have. And I think that's benefited me in the big picture, because I think from my perspective, and this is really interesting, how I got to know like the knife crowd as a whole was through Lucas Burnley, right? He was local to me at the time. He was here in Albuquerque, and we had met prior. I think I explained that story later or earlier. Did I explain that story, how we met?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
You did, through the body jewelry.
Right,
Okay.
through the body jewelry
Okay.
thing. So
Yeah.
right. So as Lucas and I kind of got reintroduced later in life, right? He's making knives full time. I'm doing my art full time. And I think part of the dynamic, at least for me personally, is being able to give back, in a sense that I realize I didn't get where I'm at alone. Right. Someone always shared information, whether it was like a formal apprenticeship or whether it was just shooting the shit or just passing on information. Right. So it's like, I realized I never got here alone. And when me and Lucas got reconnected, it's like, what do you mean you're still making everything by hand? Right.
Right.
Because Lucas is literally grinding everything by hand, cutting everything out on a bandsaw and doing and making every single piece by hand. Super admirable. You work really, really hard when you do that.
Right.
And so I come from the school of thought of like, work smarter, not harder kind of deal, that whole saying. And it was like, hey, Lucas, let me show you how we can like make things easier on you. Not necessarily better, because I think that comes later. But let's go through the process of like, at this point in time, I have my CNC equipment. I'm pretty familiar with it. And, my CAD designing at that time was all right. I wasn't using a full on CAD software. I was actually using a graphic arts package, to do CAD design. And it was like, let's design one of your knives in this package and let's see how efficiently we can make it. And if I recall correctly, the first knife that we actually designed was his Kwaiken.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Kwaiken folder.
Really?
Yeah. To be geared up to be cut on the CNC. This is like, I think both Lucas and I are similar in the sense that we're both super OCD, right? In the sense that like we're moving a line. Like I remember me and Lucas were having this discussion of like moving a line a 16th of an inch or a 32nd of an inch.
Right.
And it's like, in the big picture, is anybody really going to know that? No. But, that's his piece. That's his baby. Okay, we'll move it a 32nd of an inch or a 64th of an inch. But being able to give back and being able to show someone that it's like, you don't have to make everything by hand when the technology is there and because the technology is getting more affordable to make your life easier. And so it was really kind of that process of illustrating to Lucas on these are the steps, and this is from my perspective. And Tom and Bert, you probably have your own different perspective on how easy this is, right? But once you first jump into the CNC realm, it's not easy at all, right? It's a lot of broken tools. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of time is what it is. And so I think part of that, as we were starting to go through the design process and then the manufacturing of parts and components, going through that process, I think that's, and you can probably ask this, Luke. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that's when he kind of saw it, right?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, this is the easier way of doing it, and then so several years passed by, and that's when I started doing the USN show. Got to meet Tom, got to meet Richard Rogers, got to meet Birch. I started to meet all these other makers. And Tom and Birch, help me out if you can, because like as I recall, so this would have been the very first gathering. So that was what, 13 years ago, 14 years ago?
Yeah, 13 or 14, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think there's been 13 and we missed one, right?
Right. And at that time, there weren't very many makers who had who had in-house CNC capacity.
Right.
No, not at all. I remember talking to Todd Begg, and he was like, I remember that being a big deal.
I think Todd was one of the only like custom one guy shops that I know of for a long time. I'm sure there was others, but that's the only one that's come to mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember too, because it was there weren't a lot of makers who had in-house capacity, and as we started like as the years go by, part of the challenge was also finding like a design platform that I think a lot of people were comfortable with, and Tom, you were part of this. Is that when Lucas like orchestrated, let's learn how to use Rhino and let's spend, like 3 or 4 days as an intensive on this software. For me, it was new because I'd never used it before. And it was quite an amazing experience. And, me, you, Tom, Lucas, and Richard Rogers was there.
I felt like a total dummy. Well, I mean, you and Luke both had a little bit of like CAD experience, not Rhino. And Richard was just like a wizard. He was seriously Rain Man. He was like, design a duck, and mine was like a stick figure, and everybody else's had flames and wheels and cool shit. I was just like,
And then Richard's was like jewel encrusted with full on machine tool pass all over it. I mean, it was like, that dude is just a full on savant, right? I mean, like he totally downplays himself, and just truly is a savant. And so part of this evolution was like, okay, I'm going to buy a CNC, right? Like everybody's like, this is going to be the answer to all my woes. And it never is, but you can make cool shit and you can do stuff that you've never been able to do before.
Yeah, at the time, you and Luke had just got his, had it for maybe a year or two. Mm-hmm. And after that, Richard's like, immediately got one.
Yeah, I remember going down to Richard's place.
That light bulb just went on.
Yeah. I mean, like, really, Richard is a savant, man. I mean, like he jokes around that, like, he's like, I'm just dumb. I'm not artistic, blah, 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 blah. But Richard is, I mean, you're right. He's Rain Man. I mean, like, he just gets it and he knows it.
He thinks different. I mean, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
In a very good way.
Yeah.
But I remember when Richard got his machine, and I think it was January. I remember because it was cold, and at this point in time, I was busy serving for my Pueblo in the traditional office, the traditional leadership position I had. So I was like, Richard, I've got 3 days. I can come down. We can set your machine up, and I'm going to show you how to run it.
Right.
In 3 days, right? And it was literally like, it takes me like 3-4 hours to get to him. And we just hit the ground running. Like, I brought all my tools to level the equipment. We got he has a Haas mini mill, right? Got it all leveled, positioned, set it up, re-zeroed everything. And like, I basically showed him how to change tools, how to zero stuff, and how to clamp stuff in the machine. I think that's the fundamentals that I showed him at the time. And then the rest of the time we spent on the computer, doing CAD and doing the CAM work.
Yeah.
Working with the software. And it was literally 3 days. And I think we were working, 16-hour days.
Right.
Just cramming all that information. And then I had to leave, right? It was just like, here you go, Richard. Knock yourself out.
Yeah, if I remember right, his version of that story when we talked to him was, Pat showed up. We had this real short amount of time. We worked a zillion hours on stuff, and he was throwing stuff my direction like crazy. And I was like, what? And then Pat left, and I don't know what to freaking do. Right?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
drank from the fire hose.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. On full throttle too, man. I mean, it was just like, here you go, man. I'm throwing it all out. But to his credit, he really did absorb it. And we, not gonna lie, we had a bit of follow up, in the ensuing months, either email or phone or whatever. But he got it. Like he just snap of a finger, got it, and hasn't looked back. I mean, at all. He's doing stuff like that blows my mind, because there's things I've learned over the years that are like, I don't want to call them like trade secrets, but they're mine, right? Like I know how to do these things. And one of them was understanding and one thing that's fascinating about the CNC realm is the relationship between the design software and the machining software. And the software that Richard and I use, there was a very fascinating correlation between the two that allows you to control your toolpath generation in the design software.
Okay.
And it blew my mind. Like I kind of discovered it by accident, and then I started exploring it and like figuring out and being like, holy shit, I can actually control my tool paths in my design. Like I'm no longer subject to the toolpath generation of the machining software. And, and I told Richard about this, and I'm like, Richard, I'm going to show you this trick, but you got to promise me you're never going to fucking tell anybody. Right. It's like one of those things. This is so valuable. Like you got to respect it. It's like, okay, this is how it is. And when he saw it, like I immediately, like I was back down there. I can't even remember why I was visiting. I think it was just to visit, to hang out and whatnot. And we were making knives. That's what we were doing. I was like getting geared up for the gathering. And so I showed him the trick. And immediately I saw just that engine just like kickstarting, right? It's just like, because he works on a ranch, he's got all this old archaic equipment laying around, and you could see it, man. I mean, like you just saw it in his eyes and the thought process on, holy shit, he's going to go somewhere with this, right? Like I didn't know where he was going to go with it. And over the next 6 months to a year and a half, the stuff he was doing was just blowing my mind. And I'm like, yeah, you got it. Right. Like you just got it. And it was fascinating.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. It's an interesting thing to think about with the idea of learning new stuff, right? I think sometimes there are different motivations, right, for different people. And I think very different intrinsic value to learning new stuff, right? I mean, I think knife making historically, I think, has been a thing where there's a process and it gets handed down from this person to that person, and this is just how you do it, right? And it kind of held on to how knives are made for a long, long time, right? And yeah, there's variations, and yeah, this guy does a little different way, or different versions of the story, but all pretty traditional processes. And I think it's really interesting because personalities have differences, right? Like I think there are people that, learning something new or developing new capability is part of the reward, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. I could use that. I'm going to go learn how to do it. And learning how to do it is almost part of the payback, right? For spending the time learning how to, have this new capability in your shop. And other people, it's sort of like, okay, this is something that, from a business perspective, I kind of need, right? In other cases, it's kind of like Birch's situation, I think, right? Where, okay, this is a technology that I can see how it can, I can apply some ideas out of my head and use that technology to do stuff that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. And I think it's really fascinating just to kind of consider all these different perspectives on it. And for you, Pat, it seems like, at least based on all the conversation that we've had so far, you're someone who isn't afraid of making that jump, and maybe someone who even enjoys the learning process piece of it.
Yes, I will say I'm actually extremely afraid of making major leaps. And yes, I thrive on, I guess it's more the troubleshooting, right? Because I think you got to look at whatever technology is emerging, and part of where I'm at now in my career is that the next thing, right? Like the next tech, the next piece of the puzzle, or the next resource that I'm going to try and bring in-house, it's not a $2,000 grinder, right? Or a $3,000 grinder. It's a $40,000 laser, right? I mean, so that's the fear, because where I'm at is that the next thing, or the evolution of the technology, or the next resource, is such a high buy-in.
Yeah.
Even when the technology has been around for a while and the price has gone down. I mean, as I talked about earlier with the 3D printing, right? I mean, it went from $250,000 to a couple $100 for the tech. And so I've been very fortunate that I've been able to acquire a lot of resource that's very specific to what I do. But as I look forward, and it's like, oh, I want to be able to do that. And to be able to do that has a very high price tag in the big picture, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is scary. It is daunting. I mean, like Birch and Tom, I mean, like when you guys bought your first CNC, right? I mean, it's like, it wasn't buying a Dremel tool, right?
It's a big commitment.
Yeah. I'm not thinking about it from the concern about what it costs perspective. I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, yeah, this is from a business perspective. There's some mild hyperventilation about this money, right? It's a ton of money, and it's hopefully money well spent, right?
But it's a commitment to learn how to use it.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe I'm reading Pat wrong, but my read on Pat is I get to learn how to use it part is like part of the fun of the deal, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm going to sweat bullets on buying this thing, but guess what? Buckle up, motherfuckers. When that thing shows up, I am balls deep. I am all in on getting it to do what I want it to do.
You're going to learn it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the commitment factor, right? I mean, I think the fear is putting out the money, right? Like to me, for me, that's the fear, putting out the money. Because I think for makers in a general sense, when they choose to improve upon their craft, they look at tooling from a perspective of what does it enable me to do, right?
Right.
2, what does it enable me to do better? And 3, and this is where I completely geek out, right? Is that I know it can do this. I just don't know how.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So like when I bought like the marking laser, right? I've got like a 30-watt Galvo, and the engineer in me and the science behind it is like, I know because I've seen it done in an experimental stage. I know I can anodize titanium with a laser.
Right. Right.
Like I know it, like the physics is there. Figuring out how to do it, that was an 8 to 9 month endeavor.
Right.
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 I mean, it's like just trial and error, figuring out. And then you realize like, oh man, like my machine's not square. Focal distance is super important. Like all these little minutia factors come into play that it sounds easy, but it's not. It's like it's extremely difficult. So I guess yes. To get back to answer the question, yes, I completely love the challenge of what can I do with it And how far can I take it? I mean, I think I mentioned before that, a lot of the tech that I have here is not blistering, like it's not bleeding edge.
Right.
It's, now it's several years old, several decades old, and I'm still learning things on it. Like I don't, if someone gave me a 5th axis CNC, I don't even know what I would do with it because I'm still working in 3 axis, right? I'm not even at 4 yet.
I'm still wondering about that CAD cam trick.
Mm-hmm. Damn straight. I'm gonna have to switch over to Fusion and learn how to use that so I can run a 4th axis and a 5th axis.
There you go. Bert's just trying to squeeze your Rhino trick out of you. He doesn't use Rhino, so it's all right.
Yeah, no. It's a weird correlation. I've only seen it between the software that me and Richard use. So I think it's kind of safe that we both use the same software. Nobody else does. Yeah.
Rhino's weird. I tried it out a little bit, and it was a lot of input, like writing in random, shit, like DOS or something. It was strange to me.
Yeah, it's a Rhino. The thing that I had trouble with. I had trouble with 2 things. I had trouble with the fact that I came from a solid modeling world, right, where you're modeling solids.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Rhino is not that. Rhino only cares about surfaces. And the fact that there are so many different ways to get to the same point in Rhino that it's just ridiculous. It's like, you want to do this, and there's like 13 billion ways to do it. And none of them are easy.
Right. That's the wild part about Fusion, right? There's the same similar thing in that there's a bunch of ways to get to the same end result. And some of them look easy and they're not as quite as easy as they look, and they're not reliable or whatever, right? And then other times you figure out by kind of backing into it, this was painfully easy. I just didn't even get my head wrapped around, this function or feature or capability in the software, and you just wasted a day trying to figure it out.
But you learn.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where I was going with that whole discussion. Was it's a different in human being programming, right? I spent a day, but you know what? I learned something really cool, and okay, good. I can feel good about that. Versus I spent a day and I just wasted a day trying to figure that thing out, right? Maybe it's a glass half full, glass half empty thing, but.
Yeah, I mean, very different perspectives, So it's it's just been fascinating, and I think from my perspective, being able to contribute in that fashion has been extremely rewarding. I mean, seeing Lucas go where he's gone, seeing Richard go where he's gone, and Tom seeing where you're going, right? It's like just being just an infinitesimally small part of that, and being able to share that knowledge to me is, it's worth its weight in gold, Yeah.
So you talked about, all right, meeting Lucas and working with him on the Kwaiken, and then doing the Rhino workshop thing. You were kind of dabbling along the way in the knife thing, right? Collaboration type work. Can you talk about some of those projects with different people and kind of what you took away from some of them?
So really in the knife realm, me and Lucas have done a couple of collaborations, which have been super fun. I really enjoy them. And I don't really recall doing like actual collaborations with any other makers on that side. Now I've done component fabrication for, like people like David Broadwell when he did Folder. And so and that's another freaking gifted dude, right? Like the guy is just like old school, but just freaking talented beyond belief. Help him out to when he wanted to do a folder and do a little production line. So being able to help him out with doing the CAD, machining the components and making sure they all fit. And so that was really super cool, being able to do that, and then just being able to like visit and get to know the makers, Bob Terzuolo was in Albuquerque at the time, and being able to hang out with him and see his process. And, he's just legendary, right? And how he builds and how efficient he is. And just seeing him work was just mind blowing, being able to have like Jens and Jesper came out to New Mexico one time. Jens Anso and Jesper Voxanes. They came out to New Mexico and just, hanging out and chilling with them, seeing how they did things and being able to share on that note. It's just been really, really enjoyable seeing and getting to know people in an entirely different industry than I'm in, but they're still using the same materials that I use.
Right.
And being able to see like, oh, how do you do this? Or, and to me, that's what's been really a really fun time as I've gotten to know, a lot of the makers and being part of the gathering. And then, also getting to the point where it's like, oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to build my own knife, and it's like having that resource and the friendship to be like, oh, dude, I'm having this problem with this. Like, how would you approach it, right? And them giving me that feedback has been instrumental in my growth in that arena, because it's I have just a ton of respect for full-time makers because making knives is a lot of work. Right. And it's difficult. It's difficult work at that. I mean, like I look at it like I can make earrings all day long. Right? It's no sweat off of my back, but dude, building a folder, right? A liner lock or a frame lock, with a flipper tab, and then you got to put a clip on it that looks good. Holy shit. Right? Like there's all this stuff that you got to consider. And at the end of the day, it still has to function as a knife.
Right. Yeah. It's got a purposeful task on top of being something that looks beautiful and that you can appreciate visually. It actually has to do a job, or at least it should.
Exactly. I got to be able to open that box.
Right.
A lot of design boundaries that you have to work around that are hard sometimes.
Yeah.
So for the kind of stuff you're talking about, Pat, is almost as much, collaborative as studio time together kind of time, right? Like you said, bouncing ideas and just hanging out and seeing how stuff happens and process sharing, that kind of stuff, maybe more frequently than doing collaborative work together on a knife project, for example.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think being able to visit studios and seeing how people do things is it opens your mind up because people do the same thing differently, regardless of where you're at. I mean, I was very fortunate to spend time in Tom's studio. About 2 years ago, Tom?
Correct.
Yeah, so it was about 2-3 years ago. I got to spend a couple of days out there and just watching Tom work was blowing my mind because I told him, I was like, dude, I'm just going to come out and I'm going to be your shop monkey for a couple of days, right? Like all I got to do is have coffee, a place to sleep, and I'm just going to clean or like let me do whatever I want to do, and just hang out. But just watching Tom like hand grind, standing there at the grinder, doing the hollow grind,
right?
Just. And for Tom, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, like it's almost a mindless act because you've done it so much and you've perfected what you do.
Thanks, man. Sorry, I was choking there a little bit.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry. I know we're getting sentimental here. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, when you came out, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and it was amazing to just see it and hanging out with Daniel, your CNC guy, right? Just being able to like watch how he does stuff, and it's just eye opening. I mean, it just shows me that what I do in my little world is just that. It's just what I do, but there's all these other ways of doing things, just like Rhino. That's why it's so frustrating, right?
Right.
is that there's all these other ways of doing it, and there's no wrong way of doing it. There's just multiple ways of achieving the end result. And so for me, that I think just that visual of seeing people, how they do things, experiencing their environment. And like I said, I mean, like I was literally this shop monkey. What did I do? I cleaned out your freaking dust collector, right? That hadn't been cleaned in like 3 years. That thing was filthy, by the way. No disrespect, Tom.
It's been cleaned a couple times since then, but yeah, we probably don't clean it enough.
Sure it has, pal.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
it really has.
But it was.
But it was bad when Pat was here.
Oh, dude, that thing was disgusting, nasty. But it's like, you know what? It just needs to be done. Fuck it, I'm gonna do it, right?
Yeah, he cleaned the shop. I'm still looking for stuff. It's all good.
I look forward to Tom tomorrow morning. He's going to get his mug of coffee. He's going to tell DeRay, honey, I'm headed to the studio. That's how you know artist versus a knife maker, right? Instead of saying I'm going to the shop, which is what she knows it as, he's going to say I'm going to the studio.
I just changed the name up there. I scribbled it off the dry erase board. It's a studio schedule now.
Studio schedule. That's exactly right.
It's not the shop schedule anymore.
That's
it's the
right.
studio schedule. I love that.
I think my production just went down.
Yeah,
I'm
but
surprised you have a whiteboard. You know?
Yeah.
Mark knows about it.
I know about it. Tom's he's getting his shit together over there in the studio.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
20-some
Because
years.
a studio is way more organized and way more efficient than a shop. Yeah.
I've seen some
inherently
artistic
by the name.
types.
He's just trying to class the place up. That's all.
There you go.
Oh, it already happened.
It's done. It's already the studio. Yeah. DeRay's gonna roll her eyes. That's all I'm saying. It's gonna be like, oh, son, you are as messed up as I thought you were.
Man.
So let's talk about shows. You mentioned the Gathering. So is that the primary knife show or event kind of thing in this sphere that you're involved with, or have you done other ones?
That is the only show I've done. I think just because of my other shows that I do, it really hasn't been conducive. People ask me like, "You're gonna go do Blade," and I'm like, I kind of want to do it, but dude, that's like in Atlanta. That's like halfway across the United States for me.
Yep.
And I just don't know that market. I've been to. I mean, like I've gone to visit friends. Like Derek Obataki was still Flame. He's thrown his little get together that he used to do. I want to say like in the April May timeframe.
At
just
the
to
Steel
hang
Flame
out.
studio.
Yeah, at the Steel Flame studio, and got to hang out with him. But yeah, I really haven't done any other knife show or show that's primary knives. I don't know if you guys know Jimmy Sito.
Yeah.
He orchestrates the one that's in Hawaii.
Yep.
He's a good buddy of mine. He keeps trying to get me to go out there to Hawaii, which, I would love to go because it's a great place to be. And then you can write it off as a business expense. But I think just the shows are just bad timing, like for my schedule. But I'm hoping as I start to like, as we, because I'm going to include everybody in here as we get older and as we start maturing, we start prioritizing time and things that we want to do, and where we want to go, with the work that we do. I mean, I don't want to be here all the time making jewelry, right? Like I want to go out and explore and do other things. And more importantly, like just learn. And so I think with these other shows that are around, I think being able to be a part of it and get to know the personalities and the individuals and see where they're located at and what they're doing, to me, that's an amazing thing. And it's taken me, 13 years or so as being part of the knife industry. And I don't even really consider myself to be a part of it, right? Like I've done some work in there and I've got some really cool friends, but I'm not a full-time knife maker.
Right.
I mean, that's not my industry. I can come in and out of it great. And
Count your blessings every day.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because you guys work hard, man. I don't know how you do it. I mean, it's freaking crazy. But I was talking with Brandon. Oh God, it's gonna kill me. Let me look up his name because if I don't get it right, it's not gonna work.
That's part of us getting older.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
We gotta.
Maker or collector?
He's a maker, Brandon Hampton.
Okay.
I only know as Brandon. Like I rarely use his last name. He does chef's knives. Right?
Yeah.
And so he does like these crazy freaking like tuna swords and like scimitars and chef's knives. Like, he's a chef.
Yeah.
That's his specialty. And so we're talking about a collaboration together. And I think it's going to be great because it's like, this is who am I, right, to know how to make a great chef's knife?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have the faintest clue, but I can make a scale that's going to make that knife extremely comfortable and easy to use. Like that much I know. So we were actually talking about it today. Like, all right, what's going to be the process and how are we going to go down this road? So, being able to meet cool guys like that and being able to collaborate, it to me is just it's a blessing. I mean, to be able to work with other people and to do some cool stuff that you normally wouldn't do in your normal path, right? Like me and Bob Terzuolo, we've been talking about a collaboration, God, for like 10 years now.
Yeah.
And we've just never gotten to the point where it's like, okay, this is what it's going to be. Right. Like we've talked about ideas and concepts and everything else, but Bob's Bob, he's busy. He's just such a fucking badass. And then there's me. Right. And it's like, okay, Bob, we'll get to it at some point. But what that's going to be, I have no clue. And that's the exciting part, right? Like I have no clue. Like, how do you collaborate with Bob Terzuolo?
Right.
I mean, like I can't even fathom what that would be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's a tall hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How can I come to the table and feel like I'm doing my share with Bob? Right.
Yeah. Cause he's Bob. I mean, and because he's Bob, right. I mean, because he's Bob, he's open to it. Right. He's like, and he has the ideas and it's like, and because he has, and I think it's because he just comes from an entirely different generation that, part of the dialogue is like, what if it becomes like a gentleman's set? Right? Like something like so atypical for him, kind of atypical for me, but what if it's not a knife?
Yeah.
Right? Like what if it's a just super fucking cool belt buckle?
Right. And cufflinks and a tie bar.
Right.
Whatever. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like to me, that would be fascinating. Like, oh my God.
It would.
Yeah. I would. Yeah. It'd just be like, I don't know. Like I get excited thinking about that. So I don't know. Maybe that's what it becomes. Who knows? But Bob and I will have to sit down and talk about that and figure it out. So I might need to go visit him in California soon.
Yeah. He's got a lot of years of being very unafraid.
Absolutely.
Right. Which is awesome. We had a fascinating conversation with Bob. Two long episodes worth. It was really, really cool. We have to get him back.
And does he not have the best voice for radio?
Oh yeah. 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 It was really good. What, so everybody has their version of, we went through this crazy stuff the last few years with COVID and the world changed, right? Maybe talk a little bit about, so like you would do the gathering, but then as you mentioned before, right, you talked about some of the jewelry show stuff, the Indian market, right, show, and some other juried stuff. So prior to COVID, what would a typical year look like for you for exhibition type things?
All right. So prior to COVID, I was really doing like 3 shows a year. Right. So I would do the Herd show in Phoenix. That was in March. And then I would kind of skate and just kind of hang out and then start prepping for Indian Market in August, which is my largest show of the year.
Yeah.
And then the Gathering, right? Like literally a week or 2 after that.
I was going to say kind of right on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so it's back to back. So I'm literally preparing for 2 shows at one point in time. And that was my show schedule. Like I had gotten to the point where I didn't have to do like the smaller shows. I had I started saving up. I became a little more financially responsible, and I didn't have to hustle as hard. Right. So it literally was 3 shows a year that I was doing. And that was probably 80 to 90% of my revenue for the year. You know, I would have commission work, I would have custom work that would come in, but I'm kind of lazy like that, right? Like I really don't want to do work outside of like show work.
Yeah.
Because working with people on what they want is an entirely different experience.
Right.
Right. I mean, and some people want to be super involved in it. And it's like, at that point, I just become the mechanism for whatever it is they want.
Yeah.
Right. And then the joy goes with it. Yeah. It's just like
the joy goes away. I love that.
The joy goes away. It
So
absolutely
true.
does. Yeah. You're absolutely, the joy goes away, you know? And so like I try and steer away from that, right? Like I don't really want to do a lot of custom work. You know, but I do because you have to, you know, I mean, like sometimes like you're the only person that can do it. So when COVID hit, the show world, as you guys know, just kind of came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no alternative.
Right. Right.
And so
Kind of scary.
Time to get creative.
it was frightening. I mean, because you look at, I looked at it from my perspective and my lens is that was 90% of my revenue was shows.
Yeah.
Like I didn't do a lot of online stuff. My website sucked ass, and it was that's what it was. The one thing I was very grateful for was the social media.
Yeah.
Right? Facebook, Instagram. Those are the only 2 platforms I'm on.
It saved most of us. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and Tom, you can attest to this, that it's like you now had to rely on who you knew and what your fan base was at that time to move the product that you were creating. Because I don't know about any of you guys, but I talk to my friends who have like real jobs, and their lives changed radically because they had the stay-at-home orders, right? They were telecommuting now. Their Zoom became, their norm. My life didn't change. I mean, I already work from home.
Right.
It did a little bit. It did how you had to sell stuff. And
right.
It affected us by our customers, but yeah, day to day, I just went to work. I was very fortunate. I felt, and I continue to feel very fortunate about that.
Correct. Yeah, we were very privileged in the sense of, for the most part, what we do and how we do it didn't change. And I say that because like I had quite a few friends who probably like 6 months, a year into COVID and staying at home and not socializing. Some of my friends became pretty depressed, and it was hard for them. Like it was difficult not having that interaction that you normally have on the day to day when you go to work.
Yep.
Right. And they're wow.
I think a lot of knife makers pre-gamed that, we've talked about it before. We already deal with that.
Right.
Kind of isolation.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, because we operate in our own little world, and so So for me, you know, like one, my work routine didn't change, right? There wasn't anything abnormal or anything out of anything extraordinary happened. I mean, like what did happen was I realized, okay, my ability to generate revenue went away.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, okay, how do I do this? Right. Like what is going to be the new dynamic? And one of the things I used to loathe, right, in the jewelry industry, and this comes from being in the body piercing industry for, you know, decades and doing what I do for as long as I do it. The running joke in the jewelry industry is like making earrings fucking sucks, because you got to do twice the amount of work for half the price.
Yeah.
Because you got to make two of them, right?
Right.
You got to make a left and a right. That's the running joke. So I never really enjoyed making earrings. But I tell you what, man, I transitioned pretty steadfast into making earrings during COVID, because I was very lucky, like knock on wood. I was very lucky in the sense that I had a design that I had been refining for, God, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years. And it was the little feather earrings that I make, right? I call them tech feathers. And I had finally gotten them to a point where I could produce them extremely efficiently, and bring the price down to a point where 90% of the people out there could afford them.
Yeah.
And they were individually unique. So there's no two that are alike, right? And I put them out there and they sold, and they just continued to sell. And looking at how individuals such as Lucas, right, how he does his drops, right? Like for product, like the Psy Pops or the Polys or whatever it is he's working on, right? Like watching him and observing how he does these things, observing like a lot of our native women, like Jamie Akuma and Carrie Atumbi, and how they were doing their drops during this time where they're building up the hype, right? They're showing how they're making them. They're creating this essence and this aura and this story that goes with it of this is coming, like be ready for it, right? Taking those cues and applying it to what I was doing, because I had, like I said, I took this little feather and it's in its fourth iteration now, and being able to make it efficiently to be able to push it out there. And I think the first drop I did during COVID, God, I want to say it was like in the summer or something like that. Like everybody knew all the shows were done for the year. And I went out on a limb and I made like 20 pairs, right? Or 30 pairs. I don't know. It was like 20 or 30 pairs. And I'm like, here you go, guys. And they sold out within half an hour.
Right.
Blew my mind. Like that happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, I need to pay attention to this.
Right. Yeah.
And just seeing seeing others do this, right? I mean, like, I think it's fascinating. Like Tom and Birch, I don't know what your experiences were during this time, but online sales pretty much became exclusive.
I think there was a lot more people at home. You know. They didn't have anything to do. They were working from home. A lot of them were just surfing the web, you know?
Yeah.
Seemed like.
It's kind of an interesting thing because, you know, we'll talk a lot about, you know, the evils of social media, right? And how it kind of amplifies, you know, weird voices or does weird stuff or, you know, can steer people in a direction. And sometimes it's not always super healthy. And at the same time, with this situation, right, because of what happened and because of the isolation piece of it, I think it just turned the volume to 11 of all the social media stuff, right? And I mean, that influenced elections and did all kinds of crazy shit. And I think that's, you're smart to recognize that that's super powerful, right? Because I think a lot of that stuff, we were in that mode for long enough that I think it changed habits for people, right? And maybe people get used to this idea that, oh, here's this cool thing, and I know how to go find it, and I'm going to follow along. And I think the visibility and the amount of attention on social media went way up, because what else are you going to do? Right.
Well,
people aren't doing socializing like they were and going to dinner and whatever. They're sitting at home scrolling their phone.
And I think, like Pat, those smart makers realized that, and they actually changed the way they did things.
Exactly.
To cater that. And that's exactly what Pat's talking about. And it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, I think before COVID, I don't think I ever had a storefront for the work that I did. I mean, I was strictly relying on the shows.
Yeah.
And it was a valuable lesson, because I think as we start to move forward, so like you progress through the
even more than that, though, you changed how you interacted with your customers and fan base.
As part of it.
Yes. You could no longer call them assholes.
No, but I mean, you started showing your work that they could buy and pulling them in. You created content they wanted to see.
Yes, you created the excitement. I think from my perspective, because as a maker, you want people to be excited about your product. Right. Like, I mean, like, I think before I would post like random shots of like the studio, because it's not a shop, or random shots of my dog. Right. Or, like it was silly, right? Like it was just like, this is a day in my life. Right.
Right.
And I think we all started to realize, it's like, wait a minute, people actually want to know how we do stuff. Right. So I'll give you a great example. I'll give you a great, like, real world example. So let's fast forward to last year, right? August of last year. This is when Indian Market, the largest show of my year, was back online in a limited capacity. And I had pulled out like all the stops, right? It's like the magazine that covers the event did a 2-page full color spread, right? That was a good chunk of change. It's like, I am here, booth number, blah, blah, blah. This is the representation I have. I've got Rainmaker Gallery in the UK. I've got, Long Branch in Japan. I've got Tom Taylor in Santa Fe. I've got Mark Botti in Santa Fe and Tucson, right? Like, it's like you do the traditional print media advertisement throughout the entire show, right? And so prior to the show, I had gotten on this little kick of doing these, I call them educational shorts, right? on both Instagram and Facebook.
Super fun.
To me, these were just ridiculous, right? It's like, this is me cutting rebar with a pneumatic rebar cutter. And it's not a 30-minute video. It's like 15 seconds.
Right.
Right. It's like you do one cut. It's like, done. Ta-da. You're like, end of story. Right. So like I started doing these like little videos, because it's like, well, I can do it on my phone. Right. Started doing all these little videos. I don't know. I probably did like a dozen, maybe 2 at the most, 2 dozen at the most. During the show, mind you, this is the biggest show of the year for me. Not a single person mentioned my ad, but I had a shit ton of people were like, dude, those videos you're doing, fucking badass. You got to do more of them. I'm like, what? What are you fucking talking about, man? I was like, I didn't even realize that was a thing. So,
right.
Pretty funny, right?
To me, it trips me out. Like, I think it's funny, but I also think it's like, wow, like, I think what we do on a day-to-day basis, we completely take for granted in the process of how we do things, right? Like, like Tom, when I was in your studio, I was enamored with you grinding. Like, I don't do that, right? Like, but you do that every single day.
Yeah, I don't think about it.
Yeah, and it's like, but that's what people are interested in is kind of the minutia of what we do. And so I'm trying to do more of them. Well, because people like it.
Right. Yeah, that creates a connection, right? With your, what ultimately is your customer base, right? It lets them see behind the curtain, and that's a big deal. And I think, it's really interesting to look at how that has worked for different people. The whole okay, we're going to release stuff through drops or whatever. And I think there's a bunch of different versions of that story. There's, okay, right, I see how this works. I understand that there's a logical process to go through to kind of spin something up and then release it for sale. Okay, that's like a premeditated, like a strategized approach. I think there's other versions of that story where people are spinning stuff up, and I think maybe more, a few years ago, I think there were people that didn't even realize that they were spinning people up by doing that stuff. You know what I mean? And doing their daily post and getting people to chime in and, laugh or comment on something that they're working on is almost like a little self-ego stroke kind of play, right? And maybe inadvertently building that same kind of presence, but halfway by accident, right? And then other people are just oblivious to it and, kind of sit over to the side and say, I don't know what you guys are doing over there selling goofy shit, right? I don't know how you do it. Well, because either someone found their way there or they actually paid attention, right? And realized there's real, honest to goodness, business fundamental and marketing opportunity kind of stuff going on here. It isn't always just a lark, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as COVID progressed, right, like you learn and you become better at it, right? So like that first drop that I did was like 20 or 30 earrings. And it was like, okay, I'm going to plan for the next one. And let me space it far enough apart to where like you create the demand, right? Like, oh, this is an exclusive thing. Like I can only get it during these drops, or I can only get it if he's at a show, right? And so you kind of leverage that dynamic. And for me during COVID, that was all I did was make earrings. And it helped me grow in a sense that it helped me grow my online presence. It helped me grow like taking photos, right? Like
right.
I've been taking photos my entire life, but like taking better photos, right? For social media and creating the drama, creating the effect. And then on the back end, and like I was like Tom, when I was at your studio, I was so impressed by your shipping process, right? Like you had that nailed.
Yeah, you got to ship a lot.
Yeah, and you ship a lot. And so like, so like there's those things, it's like, why am I taping a paper label to a box when I can buy like a thermal printer with self-adhesive labels?
Right.
Like it's just dumb shit like that saves a lot of time.
Well, and it's funny because I've had a guy trying to convince me to ship on like shipping pirate, or I don't know. It's supposed to be a little cheaper. I'm like, it takes twice as long.
Yeah.
And it's more work. I'm like, I can't do that. You don't understand. If I shipped one package, maybe.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, it's got to be streamlined.
I think a lot of times people don't understand the scale that we're dealing with, right? With a lot of that stuff.
Right.
Especially with the Crine Studio cranking out a couple hundred knives a week.
Oh, yeah.
You can't fuck around.
I wish.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, God, I mean, like, if you're doing 100 shipments a week and each shipment takes you 5 minutes, that's 500 minutes, right? That's like 10 hours. Well, 9 and some change.
Yeah.
But it adds up. And that was a thing I learned, right? Like doing 20, I could tape the labels on at the, like near the, like, so my last drop right, which was December of this past year, was over 200 items,
Wow.
in a weekend. And the logistics to ship 200 items on a Sunday, right, or a Monday, that's a lot of work. I mean, there's more, in my opinion, there's more work on the back end doing all that for an online drop than there ever was preparing for a show.
Right. Way more than people realize, no doubt.
It's huge. But that's a dynamic, right? And I think as we're migrating through like the COVID and what we all had to do as makers in order to, pay the bills, keep the lights on, because I don't know about any of you guys, I didn't qualify for unemployment, right? I didn't get the payroll protection plan, like in show up in my mailbox. Well, mainly because I don't have employees, but a lot of the resource that was out there for small businesses really didn't apply or make it trickle down to, your individual makers.
Right.
And so we still had to hustle.
So what does that look like coming out the other side for you? I mean, I think we've talked on the show before about how I think for a number of makers, certainly makers that are further along in their career arc, they're coming out the other side of this thing like, you know what? I did 5 or 6 shows a year before. I'm not going to now, right? Maybe not cut it off, but I'm going to go to 2, maybe 3, and, focus on the online presence thing and focus on shows I either want to go to or feel like I need to be at or shows that I enjoy or whatever. And I'm going to handle the rest, basically online. And is it the same kind of thing for you or are you kind of planning to return to the same kind of shortened, you had a pretty short show schedule as it was, or are you going the opposite direction and doing more stuff?
I think it's going to become a hybrid. I think what I've learned is that I'm going to keep the shows that historically do well for me financially, or 2, I just have a lot of fun at the show. But 2, the online presence is significant now. And it's going to become part of the mainstay, right? So I'll do launches twice a year, once in the June, July timeframe and once before Christmas, because what taught me, what I learned like through all of this is that there is a huge client base out there for me that doesn't go to the shows.
Right.
And they want the product, and it's a well-designed and efficient product and affordable. I mean, I'm not going to be doing drops with like a $6,000 bolo tie, right? Let's be very clear on that. That's going to be like a show item, right? But I will continue to do earrings. I mean, I'll expand that line. I'll create something new. And so coming out of COVID, I think the challenge that I'm facing right now is that now that shows are coming online, is now transitioning out of that. We're making it for online, right? Because that was your only option during that time. So it's like, okay, let's go back to this show schedule and let's start getting super creative again. And so that's the challenge that I'm in, is becoming creative and not doing what was easy to do. The second thing, and I think this was me personally. I don't know how many other artists or makers or creators went through this process, but part of what I was thinking of through COVID was that there was the plan, right? Like before COVID hit, what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like in the big picture, and then COVID just like fucked everything up, right? Like it was just like, it just threw everybody for a loop because it affected everybody, right?
Everybody, globally,
right? I mean, like I've never experienced this in my life, right? Well, let me rephrase that. We've now all experienced it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so part of the thought process when I was doing this and going through this, it was like, okay, what am I going to do professionally? Like and personally to grow through all of this, because I don't know about you guys, but I've had close people die through all of this.
Yeah.
Right. And you realize that it's like, holy fuck, these are like my classmates.
Yeah.
Right. That passed away. And it's like, and like, we're not that young. We're not that old, I should say. Right. Like this group. I mean,
well, we don't think so. But...
well, I mean, like we're not 80. Right. I mean, like,
right.
You're not 90. You haven't lived like the best life, right? Like the 90 and 100-year-olds, dudes, you've seen a lot.
Right.
Like, you're probably going to be happy that you're gone, right? Like there's that, right? I mean, it's like, they're like, fucking A, I've seen all this shit like happen, right? We've gone through all these radical transitions and now this pandemic. I already lived once through the influenza, right? It's like, just take me now, right? Like that's my thought process and all that.
Yeah.
It's like, just take me now. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
But what it did do is it showed me that it's like that there's still room to grow.
Yeah.
There's still things to do. And I was very fortunate that with my partner, we were able to still travel during the pandemic, right? Going to Dominican Republic, going to Amsterdam, going to Iceland, Copenhagen. I mean, like we went all over the fucking place, right?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Because it was literally the best time to travel because nobody was traveling. And what it taught me is that, one, I want to continue to do that. That's always been the plan, to do that, to go out and travel and see the world. But I also started reflecting on being able to do that and being able to learn from others, right? And that's why I think talking about just visiting a studio and seeing what someone does is amazing. Okay, now let me take that same concept and be like, hey, Birch, can you put me up for like a month?
What's your babysitting situation?
I'm cool with kids, dude. I mean, like, depends on how old they are, but as long as their house broken, I don't have any problems with them,
Yeah.
But things like that, right? So what I was thinking of and is the thought process, right? As moving forward, and this is personal development, professional development. The thought process is to be able to team with someone I know, right? Like a friend or someone within the industry, that it's a two-way street, in my opinion, that there's something that I can give that individual and there's something that they can give me. Which at the end of the day is knowledge, right? And so I got a good buddy of mine. His name is Jason Foffel, and he owns a company called Gorilla Glass. And he's located, and I'm going to murder the pronunciation because I was taught the pronunciation. I can't remember it. It's Oaxaca, Mexico.
Yeah.
Right? Has an amazing glass facility there. And I know Jason from the body piercing industry. And it's like, Jason, dude, like, would you host me for a month? Right? Like I'll it's up to me to get down there. But I want to learn what you do. Like I don't want to be a master at what you do because you're the master.
Right.
I want to see this and I want to see how I can apply it to what I do or what we can do. And at the end of the day, come up with a product, a collaboration, a line of work. I don't know. I mean, that's the exciting part about it, is what can you do in a month or two?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like for me, that's exciting because I'm going into an area that I know nothing about, both physically, like in Mexico, in that region, and two, with techniques and materials that I have no clue on. And how can I adapt? How can I adapt and bring that into my realm? And how can I take what I know and put into Jason's realm? Right. I mean, we were both part of the body piercing industry at the same time. So I think there's a great symbiosis there, right? Like I think we both can come up with something. What that something is, just like the discussion with Bob, is like, I don't know, but it's exciting.
Right.
To me, that's the excitement. And it's like, I have very small windows of time because of the show schedules. right? That you can do these in. And to me, that's what I'm looking forward to orchestrating, because I think over time, and being in the variety of industries that I've been in, I've been able to meet and know and befriend an entire community of makers that everybody has something to offer.
Yeah.
And how do you embrace that, right? Like, that's, to me, that's the exciting part. And that's the goal. I mean, like, as you know, because the question coming out of COVID, like, what are you going to do? It's like,
Right.
man, that's what I'm going to do. Like, I want to go travel. I want to go build cool shit with fucking cool people and make money or not. I don't know. Maybe just learn. Right. And develop something. I don't know what that something is, though.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. That was kind of the thing I was poking at earlier, right? There's an intrinsic reward for some people in the learning process, right? And you just described it, right? You're going to come away from that experience and you might not go off and start making stuff out of glass, right? But you're going to come away having learned some stuff, and that learning opportunity is a reward of its own, right? And I'm the same way, right? I just took a different position at my company, and the primary motivator for me was, whoa, that's some shit I know nothing about. I'm going to go learn it. That'll be really cool, right? Let's go. And so, that's an interesting thing. And we've talked about on the show before, as we kind of went through COVID, because we had a bunch of checkpoints kind of along the way, right? Because we kept cranking out the show. We took a little break, and then we kind of came back and said, thunk, 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 is this thing still on, right? Everybody okay out there? And it was, one of the things that for me has come away from COVID, where it's like, it's awful that, people got sick, a bunch of people died. Like, you've had people that we know die, right? Family members, friends. It's been a big mess, right? Politically, the whole shit show with politics and whatever, we don't even try to touch in the show. Okay, that stuff's a friggin' disaster, right? So, okay, that's a horror show. Don't want to talk about it. But so all the bad things that happen, and people who are impacted financially and everything else, and depressed and whatever, but there are a number of silver linings in there, right? Like, I have friends that have young kids, right? And, they had like new babies. And here's a dude who, was a 80-hour-a-week guy, right? Lawyer or some kind of professional person working a zillion hours, and he's at home. And guess what? He just spent the first year of his new baby's life with his baby. And yeah, it's hard to juggle it with, work from home, but you can't get that time with that, young child. He would never have had that experience before. He couldn't, right? So and like you said, a number of people that I've talked to have actually, instead of curling up in a ball, kind of figure out at some point during the process, like, wait a second, I need to reassess a little bit, right? Because it's not just, all of us were impacted. All of us went through all this same kind of stuff. And, you see it in the employment statistics, right? How many people left and went to different jobs coming out of COVID, or being, through the COVID process? Some of it because businesses had to shut down for a while, but some of it just because, you know what? I figured out I don't have to put up with this bullshit. I'm going to go do something I want to do. And people we're not just changing jobs from one company doing, product A to a different company doing product A. They were completely changing what they do for a living. And I don't know, you hate to have trauma be the driver for that stuff, right? Or a global pandemic to force that to happen. But at the same time, I know for me personally, coming out the other side of it is like, okay, significant reevaluation of what's important, right? A significant re-rack in my own brain on what does work-life balance really mean, right? And what do I need it to mean to feel good about life and about my job and other stuff, right? And I don't know, as weird as it sounds, there's some beauty in that, right? Because it sort of forces you to a spot that maybe you wouldn't have gone to before. And I don't know, I think that's fascinating. It's fascinating human being stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Well, I think on that note, right? Like I think being able to like think through COVID on like where are you going to go,
Yeah.
for me was important. I mean, I'm at a stage in my career where, you know, I'll be 50 next year. I've kind of been very blessed in my career to accomplish what I've accomplished and kind of like make my mark on the world, right? I mean, part of this next phase of life has been like trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to learn and what am I going to learn? Because I think part of the challenge that I have, in the sense that we talk about technology and the emergence and the availability and how to get it or where it's at, is that finding that tech and exploring it and going after it can be its own journey, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a journey in someone else's court, or whether it's a financial journey, or whether it's like, I just don't know what the fuck I'm doing and I need to figure it out journey. It's been very interesting because, you know, the next phase I think is going to be extremely interesting if things fall into place where I hope they do. With like I think we talked about this before the show started, was, you know, the next phase is I want to buy a legit laser cutting machine to cut metal with a laser, not just mark it, not just anodize it, but like give me a 1/4 inch plate of stainless or a 1/4 inch plate of steel. I want to cut through that, right? Like with precision.
Right.
To me, that opens up an entire new world.
Oh yeah.
Right. To be able to do, I mean, like I thought about this a lot, right? So like what I'd like to do, I want to build like medium-sized sculptures. When I say medium-sized, like 2 to 3 feet tall, right? And just leave them in places.
Yeah.
Like remote places, kind of like an Andy Goldsworthy kind of deal, right? Who like he creates sculptures with the environment. I don't really want to create sculptures with the environment. I want to create sculptures and then just leave them in the middle of nowhere for someone to find.
Didn't someone do that like out west somewhere in Utah, like a stainless pillar or some kind of crazy coolness?
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
that was awesome.
2001 Space Odyssey thing.
Exactly. It was totally 2001 Space Odyssey. Yeah, like shit like that, right? It's like I want to play around. I want to have fun like that. And, you know, how badass would it be to like, you know, Tom, if you did sculpture, right? Like to find a Tom crying sculpture in the Ozarks. And It's big enough to pick up and carry home. And that was the intention.
Tom crying sculpture in the Ozarks. Man, I got to find that.
Yeah, everybody's going to be looking.
Dude, is that a metal dog over there?
So, honestly, I have thought there's a couple trails that aren't marked well, and I've thought of like making hammered copper like things and actually just taking them out there and staking them out with a little dog head on them and kind of random stuff.
Yeah. Guerrilla marketing.
Right.
No, that's not a metal dog. That's a duck from long ago. Tom's rhino study.
Oh, that would be so cool, though, right? Like just some random person would be like, "What is this?"
That's a shitty stick figure duck. Who knew? Oh, so funny.
Oh man, yeah. So anyway, so I guess to kind of wind things down, that's where I'm at. You know, I want to thank all of you. You know, Sean, Mark, Birch, Tom. You know, for giving me this opportunity to be part of the show, you know, because your podcast is, you know, it's pretty badass. I mean, you guys put a lot of work into it, and I think a lot of people, including myself, are very grateful that you take the time out to do these things and make it a, you know, make it a high quality product for everybody to go back to and listen and learn. I think that's the key thing, right? It's like they're able to take something away from it. So I really appreciate all of you devoting the time and energy to do it. And once you get to the video aspect of it, I think you're going to find a whole other world. That's going to be fun.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you being on here, Pat. That was pretty cool.
I awesome. You
hope the quality at all.
No, we really appreciate it. Like you said, that the learning thing is a huge piece of our motivation for doing it at all. And so if we can help people understand that there's different perspectives on stuff and people are coming at things from a different place and, came to it sometimes from really unique and different perspectives growing up or culturally or whatever, that's fascinating. And we are very fortunate to have an audience that seems to appreciate that part of it. So thank you for taking the time to join us, man.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
All right. Tom, Sean, Michael, you guys got anything you want to hit before we wrap it up?
No, just thanks for joining us, man.
Solid.
Appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you. Well, I enjoyed being a part of this, and even though these episodes or the taping has been months apart, I think it's going to blend seamlessly together with the magic that you guys have.
Magic, that's right. I'm making my sparkly jazz fingers right now.
Exactly.
So we definitely
Ooh, I want those.
You can have them when you have a studio, pal. You're welcome.
There you
I
go.
already do.
That's right.
Oh, he just now discovered the studio. It became that today.
Yes. Yep, it's been renamed. He sent me a picture of the whiteboard. He's all in.
Nice.
Yeah. We do need to thank a couple people. High five to all of our friends on Patreon who help support the show. Thank you very much for all of your support. We couldn't do it without you. We have some excellent folks in our Facebook group that help make for some fun conversations after the episodes come out, and they share their own experiences. Sometimes we do these picks episodes or other fun ones, and it's really cool to hear our listeners chime in with their own choices and feedback. And chances are every time we do a show, somebody's got a story about one of the things we talked about, which is pretty awesome. So big thanks to everybody in our Facebook group who participates and kind of helps us with the story along the way. So that's really, really cool. And I think that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you as well.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.